G'day Internet, it's Kale here with mParticle, back with the second in our series of broadcasts focused on developers and data quality. Pretty soon I'll be introducing Alex Sapunzi, a senior engineer here at mParticle in charge of our data planning API and command line interface. But first, for those of us who are joining us for the first time, who are completely new to mParticle, I want to start with a quick primer on who we are and what we do. So we are a customer data platform. We've been around since 2013. We work with all kinds of brands. But if you look down the bottom, you'll see particularly like we work with quick service restaurants, media companies, banks, with retailers, basically with any brand that needs to actually maintain a relationship with their customer, especially a relationship across multiple platforms. So as a customer data platform, our task is to get data from wherever it is. So that could be your mobile apps, your web properties, your third-party sources, your point-of-sale systems in brick-and-mortar stores. And we use identity resolution to bring all of that information together into a single view of each customer. And then we make that view available to any services that need it. And that could be marketing automation platforms, DSPs and DMPs, walled gardens for advertising, analytics, A/B testing services. And we also make those profiles directly available via our profile API to power personalized experiences anywhere you can make an HTTP call. So there are four key pillars to what we do. And the first is data infrastructure. So this is our real-time data pipelines, our suite of SDKs, our collection of integrations with a lot of our downstream tools, all of which are available to switch on at any time without a whole lot of setup. The second is data quality, and that's where we're focusing again today. And this is all about making sure you're collecting the right data and doing it consistently. And this becomes so much more important when you're bringing together data from many different sources. You have to be able to control quality so that you can look at your data as one big picture. And that's part of what Alex is going to be talking to us about. A third is data governance. So this is all about controlling and protecting your data and making sure you're meeting your obligations under legislation, under regulations like the GDPR and the CCPA, and that you're collecting and respecting user consent. And fourth is what it's all about, data-driven personalization. This is about using the data that you've collected for delivering one-to-one personalized experiences in your messaging, your apps, wherever it is that you have a relationship with your customers. So now let's focus on the problem of data quality again. And I want to introduce you to Alex Sapunzi. He's a senior engineer at mParticle, and he's the lead on the mParticle's command line interface using our data planning API. Alex, how's it going?
Great, Kale. So yeah, as Kale mentioned, I'm a senior engineer here on the developer tools team, and I've been working in media for most of my career before joining mParticle. So one of my biggest pain points was always working with third-party tools, where I would send them data, and I wasn't always sure what I was sending, if I was sending it the right way, and a lot of times I'd have to log in, wait for all that to process before I can see what I was actually sending.
Sure.
And to that end, at mParticle, we want to prevent that back and forth. We've developed some tools that let you see your data as it comes in, let you know if there's any problems with it, and using the CLI, you can even integrate it into your CI/CD process to just have that validate before it even gets to us. So
Understood.
It gives you real-time access to your data and the quality of it.
Fantastic. Let's see it.
Yeah, cool. So let me share my screen. Yeah, so here's an example of our live stream. And as you can see, these are events that are coming in real time. And one thing we're providing is, if you see some of these events that I've highlighted here, you'll see these errors here. This is telling you that the data you're sending us doesn't conform to your data plan. Now, I realize I'm kind of burying the lead here. What is a data plan? A data plan is kind of it's a contract that you as a customer would provide to us mParticle that tells us what your data is supposed to look like. So in this case, you're sending this test account is sending us a bunch of user attributes that aren't part of the data plan. So we're flagging them as they're not part of your data plan so that you can go in and either add them to the data plan if they're necessary, or just don't send them. And again, these data plans are totally under your control. In fact, I'll show you what that UI looks like. So if you were to click through to plans over here, actually, I realize I jumped the gun here, but if you have you can have a bunch of data plans. Like this would be as an example of all the different data plans for your organization. You can have them tied to different properties or different brands under your control, or even you can have them for specific collections of events. It's really what you want to use. And as you can see, they're versioned, meaning you can have one in production and then be working on a new version that's not ready for prime time yet. And then when it is, you can just flip the switch and they're live. And as you can see here, you're defining what these events are going to look like, what they're, if there's any specific names or if it should have a name, if there's any custom attributes, what they should look like. So in this example, you have a navigation event and a screen view event, and they have their own sets of custom attributes. Right. So I had one that I already baked before. This is what I was going to use for the demo purpose. And as you see, it's version 1, and it's just a very simple user event, right? And you could easily just download this data plan through the UI and work with it. Now, why would you want to do this? Why would you want to download a data plan? Because if you're sending us your data, we're validating on our side. And again, you'd have to go through that long process of sending data, checking the UI, and then coming back and then troubleshooting it that way. But through the, for people like me who like a command line interface, I can run the data plan against my data locally as a developer, or use it as part of our linting processes that we also have. And you can essentially troubleshoot your data plan or the quality of your data on your own without having to send it back and forth. And as I mentioned, our CLI, it is a very simple NPM package. So if you were to install it, mParticle CLI, I already have it installed, so I'm not going to go through that process. But at its most basic, it is a simple command of mp, and it's self-documented in that it tells you what commands are available to you. So if you're an engineer, you can easily discover new features that we implement. And if you aren't sure what a command does, so like for instance, you find this command fetch and you're not sure what it is, you can run a help command to, and it'll give you all the details that you need to send in. What you can do with this now is, so this is built on top of our Node SDK, which wraps our REST API. And instead of you sending curl requests or Postman requests to the API, you can either use the Node SDK if you're using a Node project, or if you're not using Node, like if you're an iOS developer or Android developer, you can use the CLI either just through command line like I just did, or you can tie it into your build process. So for instance, like Travis can then go out and fetch your data plans, validate as part of your build process, or even update your data plans through Git as well, which I'll actually show fairly soon. One thing to mention, just as a time-saving feature, you can pass in your credentials as command line properties. For instance, if you're like an iOS developer, so as an example, see here, right now I'm just fetching a data plan and outputting it to the screen just for demo purposes. You can also write it to a file, so you can fetch and create data plans. So as an example, I'm going to fetch the data plan that I have here. If I can spell properly. Oh, and I also forgot to write it to a file. But as you can see, we offer a lot of different options. So in this case, I'm going to write it to my data plans as Alex version 1.json. Right. And then if we look at our data plan, we see we have this data plan that I just downloaded. Right. And since this is completely under my control, I can then add it to my Git repo. Right. So now I've just committed this. So this way, if you make changes to your data plan, you don't have to constantly resubmit them for every minor change. You can work with your engineering team to keep a version of your data plans local that are completely independent from mParticle. And then when you decide, you know what, we like this data plan, we want to send it, we can then send it to mParticle as a new version. So that's what I'll do right now. I'll just clone it. CP. All right, so I'm just going to call this version2.json. If I remember now how to actually copy a file in command line. And then what I'm going to just do is modify this data plan to version2. I'm going to say it's my new version. And then what I can just do then is you also have autocomplete, which is a really handy feature if you forget commands like I tend to do. Oops. That's why they also say you should never live code. That would be because I forgot to include the file. As you can see, it tells me that it's done. And if I go to my UI and refresh, I see there is a new version. And if I want to then, for instance, if I pass this on to a PM, they can then go in here and modify it themselves. We can just say username is going to be a new feature that they can add to a new attribute. As you can see, you can also check for the data type, if this is a string or a Boolean or a number. And since they've saved this, you can then also refetch the data plan and then add it to your Git commit history. One thing also that I will mention is our validation. But here you can also validate your data plans against any particular events or data plan versions. We allow a lot of different features for passing in through the CLI or through the through a file as well. So again, if depending on what your build process requires you to do, we tend to support that. And we're still building on this. So if there's any feature that you feel like that are missing or that you'd like to see on this, we will definitely be willing to integrate it. Kale, do you have any questions?
Hey, Alex, thanks for that. We've just got a couple questions here. One is, so I heard you mention a couple of other things like linting. So how does the CLI fit into some of the other data quality tools that mParticle offers?
Kale?
Hello? Hey, Alex, can you hear me now? Uh-oh. I think we may have lost either Alex or me. Okay, Alex, I'm going to ask you this question via text, and we'll see how we go.
So I'm having a little trouble hearing Kale or knowing if I'm on, but I know there's some questions that probably are going to be coming up in this. One of the big ones is how does these features that I've mentioned stack up against the rest of the mParticle offerings? One thing I had briefly mentioned was our linters. So if you're familiar with something like ESLint or TSLint, something basically a piece of software that tells you what's wrong with your code, we've built some linters that are open source. The one I'm more familiar with is the ESLint plugin that one of my colleagues wrote. It actually uses the data plan Node SDK and the CLI to validate your code as you type. So if you create a function or a class that doesn't conform to your data plan, you'll get like a little red squiggly line, and it'll tell you what you can do to fix it. So, and as for the future of the CLI, it's something that's near and dear to my heart. We're planning on adding more features that integrate with our platform API. So for instance, being able to generate tokens, or even being able to control your audience, or any feature that you can do through the mParticle UI, we would love to allow it to use that through the CLI. Because if you're like me, I live and breathe on a command line, and I try to avoid touching my mouse as much as I can.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Alex. That was great. So that's all. Thank you very much for joining us.
Kale, it's been great doing this presentation, and I'd like to just sign off.
Cheers. All right, and thanks very much for joining.